Hi everyone, Heather here with PersephoneReturns.com, and I am here to bring you your yearly overview for the astrology for 2018. And so this year there's a lot of planetary action going on. I'm going to try to keep this as condensed and as concise as possible so it's sort of digestible and manageable for all of you who are watching to take in and to utilize. But it's going to be a little difficult because there's a lot of action going on. It's kind of a crazy year. I mean, it's been, a couple of crazy years, if not more than that. And this year's no exception. 2018 is one of the years that's been sort of talked about and prophesized about by different, astrologers and psychics and channelers and, prognosticators of all kinds for many years now. And so, now we're actually in it. We're here. We're in 2018, and this is a year of initiation into great change. And, I can see how that is starting to come about. And really, this year is all about the lead up to the energy that's going to be building and culminating around 2020, especially at the beginning of 2020. So, this is the year where it all starts. There are going to be major changes, major upheavals globally, as well as individually, economically, in terms of our structures, our stability, the government structures that we sort of fall under, our economics, all of these different things are up for change over the next few years, including, also the way that we sort of engage with and interact with Mother Earth, nature, the sort of ecological damage that we've caused and having to rectify that and deal with that. Climate change and, different things like that are going to be coming up even more so and even more chaotically than they have in the past. And, so there's a lot of different things that are coming up over these next few years, a lot of major changes. And so this is going to be a very challenging year for a lot of people. And it's also going to be a deeply rewarding year for a lot of people. So, I want to really get into this and really dissect it for you and let you know what's going on sort of a macro, general level, all the way down to more of an individual level and what you can really do with this energy to work with it and to utilize it, because I think it's really important that we do that right now more so than ever. And with Saturn just moving into Capricorn, Saturn will be in Capricorn for the next 2.5 years. And Saturn in Capricorn is all about taking responsibility for yourself. It's about connecting with your inner authority and taking responsibility for yourself. Or if you fail to do that, you're going to have to give up your power and your responsibility to some sort of outside structure, outside force, outside government. And, that's not really working for us anymore because we've been doing that for many, many years already. And, look where that has gotten us. So this is the year of tapping into our inner authority, for creating our own structures, our own rules, our own regulations, finding our own inner guidance. And self-discipline is going to be incredibly important this year for all of us as well. And before I really get into this and start talking about, I'm going to go through month by month and talk about, the overall energy and get more specific about dates and different things that are going to be happening. And then, maybe I will talk about what signs will be most affected by everything that's going on as well. But before I get into that, I do want to mention, of course, that I am doing a special on my 2018 transit readings. You can find the link for that in the description of this video. I'm doing them for $20 off only through the end of January. So that's going to be $20 off of my normal reading price for an hour-long reading. And we can go really in depth into all of your transits and how these general transits are affecting you personally as well, because some people are going to be affected more than others. For instance, anyone who is born under the fixed signs, the fixed energy, is really up for change, transformation, and transition this year. And the fixed signs include Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, and Aquarius. And so this energy of change and upheaval and transformation in the fixed signs already started in 2017 when we had the North and South nodes beginning to transit Aquarius and Leo. And when we had those major eclipses over the summer in Aquarius and Leo, especially that big eclipse that happened on August 21st of 2017, the big solar eclipse in Leo that was visible all across the United States. That was a huge impact and a huge transition point for a lot of people, especially if you have a lot of energy energy near the end degrees of the fixed signs. And so that is going to continue this year because the eclipse cycles are continuing in Leo and Aquarius all the way through until November when they move into Capricorn and Cancer. And so the fixed signs are not only going through this change in upheaval, which, fixed energy likes to keep things as it is, right? That's why it's fixed. These are the signs that are represented by the midpoints of each season where things sort of stay stable, they stay the same. It's like, it's the culmination point of that season. It's the full energy of that season, and it's very stable. It's not a transition point. The transitionary energies occur during the cardinal signs and the mutable signs. The cardinal signs are about beginnings, and the mutable signs are about change, transition, and endings. And so when we have disruptive energy like Uranus moving into Taurus, which is a fixed sign, and the north and south nodes, which are hugely disruptive, hugely transformative, that turn our lives upside down when when they're triggering something in our chart, and especially when those eclipses happen, those are major changes, major points of upheaval, and major points where we need to learn to surrender, right, and let go and to move with change, because the change that is coming is very fated, very predestined, and it serves to align us onto a new path in our lifetime. And so, when we have all this disruptive energy in the fixed signs, it can be very uncomfortable for a lot of people, because the fixed signs and the planets that are in the fixed signs represent energies where we want to hold on to something, right? We want to keep things stable. We crave a certain amount of sameness in these areas in our charts. And so if you have a lot of fixed energy, you're probably already starting to feel this, but you're going to feel it more so as we get into the year. And especially as Uranus moves through Taurus over the next 8 years, which I'll be doing videos specifically on that topic for each of the 12 zodiac signs. I'll be putting those on Astrology's YouTube channel, and I'll be doing a general video about the major world and global changes that are going to be occurring throughout Uranus and Taurus over the next 8 years, and I'll post that on here on my Persephone Returns YouTube channel. But we will get into that a little bit today as I'm talking about these things. So, we'll get into a little bit of the gist of what's going on here. And I also did a video on Astrology's YouTube channel with Astrology herself about Uranus and Taurus for the next 8 years, and what we can expect, and a little bit by sign as well. So if you want a little taste of what's coming, you can always jump on there, search it on YouTube, and find that after you're finished watching this video. But anyway, so we have this energy. First off, a lot of change, a lot of transition for the fixed signs, as I mentioned. The water signs are getting some really nice energy that is coming from Jupiter and Neptune, even though Scorpio is a fixed sign. So Scorpio will be subject to disruption, especially throughout the year with these eclipses squaring Scorpio with Uranus moving into Taurus, which is opposing Scorpio. Though there will be disruption, but there's also a lot of beautiful energy coming through here, where the disruption for Scorpios especially is going to be a little bit easier to deal with. It's going to be a little bit more beneficial. You'll see the results of the changes that you're making, the transformations that you're going through a lot more quickly, and they'll be more beneficial and more easy to deal with for Scorpio, and for the water signs too in general, because you do have that the other major energy that's happening this year besides Saturn and Capricorn, which is causing us to do the hard work, to discipline ourselves, to follow our own inner authority, to let go of old structures and systems that are not working for us, that are imposing themselves on us, that are imposing their willpower on us, and causing us to act outside of our own integrity, right? That's something that we have to deal with Saturn moving into Capricorn. And then Uranus and Taurus is disrupting our very foundations, the things that we hold dear. That's going to be a whole different thing that we're going to get into. And then, all at the same time, we have this really beautiful energy that's going to be coming on and off between Jupiter and Neptune in the water signs, in Scorpio and in Pisces. And that actually started toward the end of 2017, right after Jupiter moved into Scorpio at about 11 degrees. It was trining Neptune. I believe that was in November. It might have been the beginning of December. I could be a little off on my memory on that, but this is a really beautiful, really powerful energy that's going to bring in more deeper intimacy. It's going to help us to change things in a way that is truthful and focusing on the core of the issues, the truth, and bringing that out into the open, right? That's something that we're seeing with Jupiter and Scorpio is the truth cannot remain hidden, and once we bring it out into the open, once we look at things that need to be looked at with Jupiter and Scorpio, we realize that these things that we've been repressing and suppressing and holding in because they feel scary to us, right? These things are not that scary after all. Once we put it out into the open, it's like, oh, well, I feel relieved that I looked at this. I don't know why I was holding it in for so long. This is actually not that bad. It's not that hard. It's not that scary. And bringing it out there helps you to transform and transmute that energy. And so, that's a lot of the energy of Jupiter and Scorpio. It's also about deepening intimacy, in relationships and in, all of our engagements and interactions. It really depends on where that's happening in your chart, which we'll get into later on. But this Jupiter trine to Neptune in general is a deeply compassionate, deeply romantic, deeply connected energy. It's a deeply psychic energy too. So this is a time when we can tap into our abilities to go between worlds, go between realms, to sort of pick up on these subtle energies that are going on all the time around us that we don't normally pay attention to. This is really good for tapping into psychic energy, intuition, other dimensional energies, those types of things, dream work too. All those different things are associated with Neptune and Pisces. And so, it can help us to expand on our vision from a place of truth, a place of self-knowledge, a deeper place in Scorpio, but to do so very compassionately in a way that's very connected, where we're accounting for the needs of other people without necessarily martyring ourselves in the process, because that can be an issue with Neptune and with Pisces, right? But in this beautiful trine, it comes across in a way that's beneficial for everyone. And so these are periods of time when there's a lot of instability, actually, during the time periods when these Jupiter-Neptune trines are going on over the course of this year, especially in May and in August. These are two very pivotal months in the year in terms of like the disruption and the sort of more difficult astrology to deal with. And we have this really beautiful gift of Neptune trine Jupiter, which is going to help us to connect with a higher purpose, a higher cause. And through connecting, with these spiritual realms, with these other energies, with the deeper meaning behind everything that's going on, we're going to be able to move through what's happening much more easily. And so that's going to be a really important transit that's happening as well. In addition to that, I did mention that we will still be having the eclipses in Leo and Aquarius throughout the year. There will be an eclipse in Cancer that comes about in July, but it won't be a true Cancer eclipse because the North Node will still actually be in Leo. So this is going to be a partial eclipse. The North Node is not in a close conjunction with the Sun and the Moon because this is a solar eclipse. So it's like a little sliver eclipse, right? Instead of that total eclipse that we saw when we came into August of this year. And so yeah, there's a lot going on this year, a lot of crazy energy, a lot of change. And with Uranus moving into Taurus especially, this is the beginning of disruption when it comes to finances, right? Ruled by Taurus. So our financial stability overall as humanity and our current financial structures, those are going to start to be disrupted in a number of different ways. This also involves things like cryptocurrencies, right? And silver prices also could be up for change. And this isn't just this year. This is for the next 8 years, right? We're thinking about things that Uranus rules and that Taurus rules. Uranus rules disruption, it rules new technology and innovation also. So while these things are being disrupted, like our current financial system, the fiat currency system that we currently operate under, that's by a centralized bank, that is going to be disrupted, and that's already very apparent that that's becoming disrupted. And so what's going to happen is new innovations are going to come in to take the place of the old, the structures that are crumbling, that are falling to pieces. And it's going to be disruptive. It's going to be chaotic, especially for people that don't understand what's going on or don't expect it. Because right now there's this illusion of safety and security when it comes to there's a feeling, most people get the sense that it's not necessarily safe, stable, or secure, even though it looks like that outwardly, right? We have a lot of bubbles that are being created, a lot of illusions when it comes to the marketplace, when it comes to a lot of different marketplaces. But you can see what's going on here, right? So we can see that the price of food, especially good, healthy, real food, is becoming more and more expensive and more out of reach for a lot of different people. We can see that there is probably going to be some sort of scarcity when it comes to our food and our resources in that way. Again, this isn't all going to happen in 2018, so maybe I should leave some of this for the Uranus and Taurus video, but it's something that we need to start thinking about this year because it's starting, right? The last time we had Uranus and Taurus was when we had the Dust Bowl. It was also just, right after the Great Depression set in, and it's also when we adopted a fiat currency system as opposed to the gold standard. So like the United States, along with many other Western countries, around the time that Uranus shifted into Taurus, they all left, the gold-backed system and moved into a fiat currency system. And so money changed then, right? And that was the new technology, printing money, but not having to have anything to back it up. We didn't have to trade with actual stuff. It was just an agreement, which is what it is still now. And that's also what cryptocurrencies are. They're essentially an agreement. It's, it's not backed by anything besides, I don't understand fully how the cryptocurrencies work. I'm not a big, economist person or financial person in any way, shape, or form. I just kind of listen to what my friends tell me, and I listen to various people on the internet like Cliff High. But it seems like this is the way that we're going, right? We're going into more of a digital currency, and so the way that we shift into that, it's kind of up in the air whether or not it's going to be something that's manufactured, that's controlled, which is what they're going to try to do, right? With Saturn being in Capricorn, the governments, the power, the hierarchies, the corporations, the powers that be are going to try to impose their will on the people much, much more. And as soon as Saturn moved into Capricorn with that conjunction between Saturn and the sun on the winter solstice, that was actually a really interesting time period, because we had that tax bill that came in the United States that everybody was in an uproar about. And since then, there's been a lot of the government trying to impose their will on the people a little bit more. There's talks about, Jeff Sessions and wanting to, crack down on states that have legalized marijuana for recreational and medicinal use, which most people don't agree with, wanting to crack down on that, right? So it's the will of the people versus the will of the corporations and the will of the government. And they're going to be cracking down. They're going to be grabbing for power because they feel their power slipping away, especially with Uranus and Taurus. There's going to be a lot of change that they don't want to see, right? Because the change makes it more difficult for them to maintain power and control and stability in the way that they would like to. And so we're going to see more of this. And especially, it's interesting, Saturn in Capricorn. Capricorn is an earth sign. The earth signs rule all things created by Mother Nature. They rule things that are connected to the earth, like plants. Even Capricorn, right? Capricorn, you think of corporations and power structures, and that's part of what it is, right? It's more of these structures trying to impose themselves on these different things. But when you think about the earth signs, you're talking really about things that come from the earth that are very grounded. They all have an association with nature, with Mother Earth, with the body, and with health. And so, Saturn in Capricorn it's interesting that that's sort of how it started out, was with this power grab and this controversy around, medicinal and recreational marijuana, and how the government is trying to go against really the will of the majority to keep things, under their control, because this isn't something that they can control. If you can grow your own medicine in your home, they really have no way of controlling that. They can't have an officer at every single person's home, searching for marijuana. I mean, I guess if they really wanted to, they could, but that's not really practical to do. So anyway, it takes our health back into our hands. And that's part of also what's happening with Uranus and Taurus. We're going to start to connect with the earth in new ways, in innovative ways. There are going to be new and innovative ways that come in that help us to restore the environment and restore the damage that we've done. Also, I see this, we already see that the climate is becoming more and more unstable, chaotic. Weather patterns are very unusual, unpredictable. We're having a very cold winter, which is a Saturn and Capricorn thing, in and of itself. But this is, I think part of a bigger cycle. So, we're looking at things like climate change, weather manipulation, what's going on in these areas. There's going to be, again, more of a pull for control. More of a pull for, governmental regulation in these areas over the course of the next 2.5 years. And so it's going to be an interesting time. And that's why I'm saying we need to take back control and take back our own inner authority, right? We need to, be responsible for ourselves and learn to be responsible for ourselves again. Learn to take care of ourselves in ways that we haven't for a very long time. Learn to be less dependent on the system and to create our own structures, our own systems within ourselves and within our own communities, within our own families. That's what this time period is going to be about. And again, not all at once. These changes are going to happen very slowly, very methodically. A lot of people won't even notice that they are happening until it's already happened and it's a little too late. So, just forewarning everyone, it's not going to be an easy time period globally, which I guess, you could probably already sense. Anyone with eyes to see and ears to hear can, can pick up on that without needing to look at the astrology, but the astrology supports that as well. And so I do see things getting a little interesting on a global scale. But that doesn't mean that there's not good things happening too. A lot of new innovations and new solutions to these problems are coming up this year and in general. And so we're going to learn how to solve these problems for ourselves. We're going to learn to stop scapegoating and, putting all of this on other people and on the government to take care of for us, because we're learning and we're seeing through our experience that that doesn't work anymore, right? So we need to take back our own power, our own control, and start changing things for ourselves, right? From the ground up, because that's the only way that it's going to happen. Change our own lives, change ourselves, change our communities. And, everything else will change along with that. But most people are waiting for the government, or they're blaming the government, or they're projecting all of their fears, insecurities, anxieties on these governmental figures, like on one man, one person, right? Thinking about Donald Trump when I'm talking about this, but also, Kim Jong-un and Putin, whoever it is, right? There's always someone, and we project all of our fears, all of our anxieties on this one person. And we think that they control everything when they don't. They really don't. It's one person. There are way more of us than there are of this person. There are way more of us than there are, people that are working in the government that are working against us. And there are also people in these structures that are trying to work for us, right? So we have to keep that in mind, and we have to stop placing all of the responsibility on everyone else and start taking back responsibility for ourselves over this next couple of years. So that's kind of one of the points that I wanted to get across. But I'm sure a lot of you are already sort of aware of these changes, aware of these things that are coming in, and if you're not, then there you go. And so this is going to be the year of taking responsibility for yourself. And so I'm going to start getting into what's happening each month and sort of what's going to be coming up and how we can deal with that best. And so I'm going to start with January. We're already in January right now. We're on January 8th when I'm recording this. I don't know when I'm going to upload it. But so today, so throughout the month, this month, we started off the month and the new year with a huge, crazy supermoon in Cancer. And so a lot of you were feeling that. A lot of major crises and changes came up. It was the same time, within 24 hours that we had Uranus stationing to go direct in the sign of Aries. So it was just a lot of interesting cardinal energy all at once. So the people in the cardinal signs felt this the most. So that was, Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn. And that was also around the same time that we had, Saturn and Capricorn, Saturn moving into Capricorn, conjuncting the sun. We also had the sun in Capricorn. It still is. So there was a lot going on for the cardinal signs during that period. And there were a lot of major shifts, a lot of major crisis, and a lot of major upheavals, especially emotional crisis, physiological crisis, psychological crisis. I mean, it was coming across in many, many different ways. And so we had an interesting holiday season where we were sort of wrapping up this energy of Saturn in Sagittarius with that Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius at the same time, finishing out those end degrees, wrapping things up, reviewing, redoing, looking at that energy again. And a lot of things came up again for people in that Saturn and Sagittarius area of their lives. And then after that, we came into this whole new, crazy transit. So what the supermoons are, that's when the moon is closer to the earth. It's closer in proximity, and so it affects us more. We actually had some of the highest tides on the eastern coast of the United States that have ever been measured at that time period. That's how powerful the pull of this supermoon was. And then it created some really chaotic weather out of that, right? We had the cyclone bomb that happened, or whatever it's called, on the east coast, just a few days after the supermoon. And so, the moon has to do with the tides. It does influence our weather. It does influence our own individual experience, especially our internal subjective perception of reality. So when we have these moons that are really close to the earth, they cause emotional and psychological crisis, but they can also cause physiological crisis as well, and sort of chaotic things that come from the outside that sort of are playing off the energy that's going on internally. And so the supermoon in Cancer was a big one. And so we're still coming off that energy, but, it was a major time where you have to deal with some sort of, crisis, be it internal, external, whatever. Even if it's not you that's going through the crisis, someone who's going through a crisis, and you have to deal with that type of energy. And even, one of my teachers, Lynn Coiner, she calls these crisis full moons, or, when it's a new moon that's close to the earth, a crisis lunation. And that's because it's such a strong energy, because the moon is a huge influence on us. The moon and the sun are their two biggest influences because they're so close to us. But the moon, especially when it's that close, there's a lot of energy behind it. And even the gravitational pull of the moon, is felt more, and it's tangible. You can see it, you can measure it, right? This is a measurable influence on physical sort of happenings here down on planet Earth. So if you can measure it and see it in such a tangible way, of course, it's going to be affecting us on many different levels. It's not as subtle as something that's going on farther out. And that's why, we pay so close attention to the new moons, the full moons in astrology. And that's also why the eclipses are so important. And speaking of eclipses, the next major thing that's going on in January is going to be the blood moon total lunar eclipse that's happening at 11 degrees in Leo on January 31st. And this is going to be a big one. It's, again, huge for the fixed signs. So if you have your sun, moon, rising, or any of your personal planets really in, especially at the middle degrees of Leo, Aquarius, Scorpio, or Taurus, this one's going to be affecting you, right? Because it's either going to be affecting you in conjunction, opposition, or square. So this is going to bring a little bit more of a difficult experience where things can be chaotic. There can be major changes, major upheavals, major transformations. But these transformations that come about during this time, any crisis or any sort of difficulty that comes about during this time, has to do with aligning you on a better path, a greater path, a path that's more in alignment with your authenticity, where you're connecting and communicating with people in a way that's courageous and authentic. You're communicating your authentic self, right? That's like such a cliche sort of buzz phrase, but that's truly what it is about. You're communicating from the heart, you're connecting with people from the heart, you're connecting with your passions. So this is throwing you on a whole new path, and you have to walk that path courageously. And you've already been starting to be pulled into that path, right? With this eclipse cycle that started last year. But in particular, this is interesting because this is sort of the culmination point of the the solar eclipse that happened in August, right? So this is going to be sort of the opposite, the culmination point, because that that solar eclipse in August was a new moon, right? The solar eclipses are new moons. It's when the sun conjuncts the moon. And so this is almost 6 months out, going to be the full moon lunar eclipse, and it's a total lunar eclipse, and it's in Leo. So a lot of things that began around that time period in August, which people were feeling it, a month or so before, a month or so after, but really around August was, the culmination point, the strongest energy of that. So things would have started all summer long, and really into, the early fall, you would have started seeing that of people, feeling that transformation, that transition, being pulled into a path, and sometimes it's against your will, right? And it's not what you thought it was going to be. And so, that was part of the energy. So whatever was coming up for you at the time, if it was something that was a crisis, this is a time when it can be resolved. If there was something good, this is when it can start to come to a culmination point, come to a head. You can start to see the results of whatever it was that was changed and whatever transformed for you during that time period. You're going to start to see it manifesting in physicality a little bit more so. And so, and a lot of that energy is going to come back up again in a lot of different ways. So it just depends on what came up for you. Think about what came up for you in August and what's coming up for you now, because it's a very similar energy, but it's a little bit reversed. So this is more like the culmination point. That was more like new beginnings, right? Where you're changing and transforming and jumping into something new. And this is also where we can let go. When we're talking about a full moon, it's always a culmination point and also a crisis point. So things that didn't work for us are going to come up, so we can release them and let them go. And things that did work for us are going to start to come to a head, come to a culmination point. And also things that were initiated that didn't work for us, they can still come to a culmination point, but we can also look at it and let it go, right? It's a time to release what hasn't worked and to hold on to what did for the rest of this cycle. And then also, Yeah, so that's pretty much what's going on for January. For the rest of January, we have that huge total lunar eclipse that's happening in Leo. Mars will be moving into Sagittarius toward the end of this month. That's sort of more of a minor influence. Mars does well in fire signs. It's going to be more about taking action for our future goals, taking action out of integrity, taking action out of a higher belief system, a higher purpose. Those types of energies. So I'm going to just go over the main things. I'm not going to go over every single little transit that happens each month because, that's just crazy to do and a little excessive. And I'll be going through all of these, by the way. I'm going to start doing after the new moon my weekly forecast for all 12 signs again on here on this channel. So keep a lookout for that. So we will go through all 12 signs each week, and you'll see the smaller influences and how they're going to be affecting you. And of course, I always do my written weekly forecasts. They're very general. They're not specific to each sign, but you can get a lot of information from that as well, especially if you're looking at timing for different activities and things that you want to do throughout the week. You can see when it's going to be a little turbulent, when it's going to be better for that. So I'll put the link for that in the description of this as well, just in case you're interested in that. But I'm going to keep going with just each month and sort of the general vibe, the general energy that's going to be going on. And so February, we have a solar eclipse again at 27 degrees Aquarius. This is not a total eclipse, but it is pretty strong and pretty close. And this is actually going to be a south node eclipse, whereas the eclipse that happened in Leo in the summer, that was a north node eclipse that was pulling us into something, right? That was more about new beginnings, transformations, transitioning into something new and doing so courageously, transitioning into something that we're more passionate toward and more passionate about. It really depends on where that was happening for you in your chart. It could have brought something good, could have brought something bad, could have brought a combination of things. But this solar eclipse is more about endings, surrender, and letting go, because we're talking about the South Node. The South Node represents things that we've already mastered, things that we've already done, and energies that we're holding on to because they feel comfortable, but we really need to let go of. And in Aquarius, it's about holding on to energies that involve groups of people, the hive mind, wanting to show up to appease others, and also trying to be too overly individualistic for individualism's sake, right? They're kind of contradictory, these energies, but that's the nature of Aquarius. It's very enigmatic. It wants to be accepted by the group, but it also wants to be this individual, but they can be very dogmatic also. So there's a lot of these energies, right? So letting go of dogma, especially group mind, hive mind dogma that you've attached yourself to because you're going with the group, right? You're going with what's best for humanity instead of what's best for yourself and what your own passions are, instead of following what's true to you, right? And so this is about following your truth. And in order to do that, you need to let go of following everybody else, right? And trying to appease everyone and account for what everybody else needs. What do you need? What are you passionate about? How can you let go of, caring so much about what other people think? And how can you let go of trying to be unique and individualistic just for the sake of being rebellious, of being unique, those types of things, right? Focusing more on being who you are, even if that's something more traditional. And also letting go of the things that are non-traditional, right? And focusing more on more traditional ways of interacting, engaging, and communicating with people where you're connecting from the heart, connecting from a deeper place. Because that's really what the North Node in Leo wants. It wants deep, heartfelt connection, and it wants to follow its own passions, its own truth. And so, in Aquarius, it's letting go of thinking about things so scientifically, thinking about things, from a headspace, right? So it's letting go of analyzing everything, trying to think about things scientifically, trying to have proof for everything. It's being too much in your head, right? That's what Aquarius is. It's thinking too much with the head instead of following your heart. And so where can you let go in terms of those themes, in terms of overthinking things, in terms of thinking too scientifically, too dogmatically? Science and dogma kind of go hand in hand sometimes. And, that is the nature of Aquarius, which rules science. And that is the nature of our current paradigm. So thinking about things less dogmatically, trying to focus more on what you want, your own passions. Don't worry so much about what everybody else needs or how this is going to affect all of humanity. That is something that you need to care about. But if you're following your heart, if you're following your truth, if you're following what you truly came here to do, you're going to be in alignment with everybody, with what everybody else needs anyway. You don't have to worry about that, right? Because some people maybe came here to do bad, evil things, and that's just what they're here to do. But for the most part, if you're following what's inside and what you're passionate about and what you truly feel for and what your purpose is that you came here to do and create, then you're not going to have to worry so much about that other end, right? That'll take care of itself. All right, so that is February, guys. And of course, February will be a big month, especially for the Aquarius and Leo people, and also people who have sun, moon, and rising in Scorpio or Taurus will be feeling this a little bit more intensely than the others. It'll be very beneficial for the air signs, especially Aquarius. It'll be kind of more turbulent, but if you have sun, moon, rising at the middle to end degrees of Libra or Gemini, this is going to be affecting you in a way that's more positive. It's going to be a more gentle transformation transition where you're able to let go very easily of whatever you need to be letting go of in order to move deeper into your path in this lifetime. All right, so March of 2018, we have this, so that's when, the moon or the sun will be in Pisces and it'll shift into Aries mid-month. We have a few different things going on here. So Mars will conjunct Saturn. First off, I'm going to talk about Mercury retrograde because the Mercury retrograde pre-shadow will start at 4 degrees Aries, and that'll start on March 11th of 2018. And so, March is going to be an interesting energy for the cardinal signs, right? Because we have a Mercury retrograde in Aries, and that Mercury retrograde will really start on the 22nd of March of 2018. And so that's going to be affecting, the cardinal signs, which again is Aries, Libra, Capricorn, and Cancer. And so I did say that this is going to be a turbulent time for the fixed signs in particular, or a more disruptive time for the fixed signs in particular. But this is also going to be a lot of energy around the cardinal signs this year. But the energy of the cardinal signs is more about building. It's more about having to do the hard work, right? So it's going to be a little bit of a different energy. It's not a lot of change and transition. It's more about maintaining and creating stability. And so, Mars and Capricorn will conjunct Saturn, and this is going to be a time period that can be very, very frustrating for a lot of people. Especially if you have your sun, moon, and rising, at the beginning degrees of the sign of Capricorn, or even in Cancer, or again, Aries, Libra. And so when Mars conjuncts Saturn, this is a time of deep frustration. These are two malefic planets in traditional astrology. When they come together, it makes things difficult. And usually with Mars conjunct Saturn, it's like wanting to start something, wanting to initiate action, but just like you're pushing up against a wall and you can't make it happen, that type of thing. So there's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of wanting to jump in and move and do things really quickly, which is kind of hard to do with Mars in Capricorn. Mars does well in Capricorn, but it's more about taking things slowly, doing the little steps to, create what you want to create and do what you need to do on a day-to-day basis, as opposed to jumping all in and doing it all at once. It's more about building a solid foundation, right? I always tell people that Saturn requires that you do things the right way, not the fast way. And so that's a lot of what this energy will be. So it's a little frustrated energy, a little of a failure to launch in a lot of different ways. And again, it's going to be affecting those cardinal signs the most. And then Mercury stationing to go retrograde at 16 degrees Aries. So if you have sun, moon, and rising, especially between, I would say 17 and like 4 degrees Aries, Libra, Capricorn, and Cancer, you're going to be really having a lot to deal with in terms of this Mercury retrograde, right? So this is going to be going back and revisiting, rethinking things. In Aries, the energy is rethinking things that we probably initiated and jumped into too fast. I think that's sort of the theme of this month of March for a lot of people. It's like, where did you make decisions hastily? Where did you try to rush things? Where do you need to go back and redo things and do things the right way? And so, Mercury retrograde, of course, is not the greatest time for, and also Mercury retrograde is going to be conjunct Venus on and off too. So this is going to bring up a lot of communication issues in relationships, especially where people are communicating in a way that's a little too blunt, a little too straightforward, a little abrasive. And so this is going to have the potential for arguments, I would say, in March for a lot of people, especially if you're someone who doesn't tend to do well with Venus and Aries. So this is going to be an interesting energy there. But I don't remember what I was about to say about Mercury and Aries before I got onto that little tangent. But in general, this could be, miscommunications. This could be a lot of relationship issues that come up, fights, I would say arguments. So be wary of that, and just make sure that you're getting everything together beforehand, and you're not jumping in too hastily to anything, and you're not, make sure you think before you speak. That's going to be kind of the theme of this Mercury retrograde in March. So it begins on March 22nd of 2018, and it'll actually be retrograde all the way until April. On April 15th of 2018, it'll actually go direct. And so that's the time period that we have to worry about all the normal Mercury retrograde things. But especially in this case, saying things that we don't mean, saying things in the wrong way, having them being taken the wrong way, that's something to be aware of. And then in April, so April, we have Mercury stationing to go direct at 4 degrees Aries. And then the only other thing that's really crazy going on is Mars conjunct Pluto, which happens again in one of the cardinal signs. It's going to be happening in Capricorn toward the middle to end of Capricorn. So if you have, I would say, your sun, moon rising between 17, like we'll say 16 to like 23 degrees or 22 degrees, somewhere around that time, or that those degrees. So sun, moon, and rising Capricorn in particular, but also Cancer, Libra, and did I say Libra? Yeah, and Aries. Those are going to be affected by this the most. And this is a very intense energy. When Mars conjuncts Pluto, it's about jumping in and doing things really intensely, really passionately. It can bring up fights, arguments, power struggles, those types of energies. It's usually a very intense time period, and it's felt most intensely not only by the cardinal signs, but also by people who are Scorpio and Scorpio rising, because it's your two ruling planets that come into conjunction. I know I'm a Scorpio rising, and that day is a day that I'm always fired up about something, right? There's something going on, and I am fired up about it. Also for Aries people in particular, right? Because this is Mars, it's your ruling planet. So whatever Mars is doing is going to affect you more. And that's why, if you do get a personalized reading for someone who's an Aries or an Aries rising, I'm going to be going through the Mars transits in particular, because that's your ruling sign, and that's going to be affecting you more so than some of these other planetary transits. So for Aries people, watch out, right? It's going to be, intense. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be bad. These two planets do well together. Mars is, power. It's the will. It's the lower will, right? It's the way that we enforce our will through physicality. And Pluto is the higher will. It's, doing things through, sometimes it can be through manipulation and through using your power and utilizing your power in certain ways. So that's part of it. But, with Pluto, it's more about your inner power, your inner strength. It's empowering yourself from within to do something without. And that's really the highest expression of this energy. So whatever's coming up for you, whatever frustration's coming up for you, it's causing you to look at that, right? It's looking at how you can become empowered to take the right action to correct these situations. And so that's going to be in April. May, you guys, May is like one of the biggest months that's happening this year, because a lot of things are happening. So this is, first off, this is when Uranus enters Taurus, of course, for the very first time. So we talked a lot about the Uranus and Taurus transit and how that's going to be affecting people over the next 8 years. If you have your sun, moon rising at the beginning degrees of Taurus, or any of the fixed signs as we talked about, you're going to be feeling this. This is a time, a big pivotal change. Taurus people are going to be feeling this the most. This is a time when your whole lives will be changing. All of our lives will be changing in one way or another, depending on what area of our chart is being affected by this. And so Uranus entering Taurus is a major disruption. It's a very interesting energy that disrupts the foundations that we thought were stable, solid, and secure, right? It's shaking up our foundations, shaking up the things that we thought were unshakable. And it's going to be an interesting time to deal with. But if you start feeling something, if you start feeling frustration during this time period, it's signaling you as to what needs to change, so you can change it from without before the change comes, or change it from within before the change comes from without, right? That's really the goal of dealing with a Uranus transit effectively, because if you don't change from within, if you don't make the changes yourself, something completely off the wall crazy is going to come in and change things for you. And sometimes that'll happen anyway, but if you're engaging with the energy, it's usually going to be a little easier and a little bit more beneficial when it does come about and when it does come to pass. And what's interesting about Uranus entering Taurus is that Mars goes into its pre-shadow. So Mars is going to be going retrograde beginning in June, actually. And so Mars enters its pre-shadow period at 28 degrees Capricorn. And that actually happens at on the 13th. So on the 13th of May, right? So that's going to be a very interesting time period in and of itself. Then 3 days later, the same day that Uranus enters Taurus, Mars will square Uranus just before, Uranus enters Taurus. So the last thing that Uranus will be doing before it enters Taurus is having that square with Mars. And there's going to be multiple squares with Mars going on here over the course of the next couple of months. But this is going to be, a very interesting, very intense energy for a lot of people. This is a time when you need to make some sort of change. And so this is actually going to be occurring in the cardinal signs, but it's also going to be affecting the beginning degrees of the fixed signs as well. So again, big year for cardinal and fixed energy. Mutable signs aren't getting as much shake up as some of these other signs are. So if you have your sun, moon, and rising in the mutable signs, which is Virgo, Pisces, and sorry, I'm blanking right now, Sagittarius and Gemini, you just had a lot of crazy stuff, right? You just had Saturn going through Sagittarius the past few years. You just had the North and South node in Virgo and in Pisces in the past couple of years. So now it's letting up in terms of those energies, but other areas of your chart will be affected this year. So this is a big major change, lots of frustration. Whatever you feel frustrated about, channel that into changing something about it. Channel that into finding new and innovative solutions to your frustration and to the old problems that keep coming up for you time and time again, right? That's a lot of what that energy is. So yeah, and then Mars, will go into Aquarius, where it'll be starting its retrograde sort of motion. And so Mars actually doesn't go retrograde into June. So now we're coming into the month of June. Venus will square Uranus in June. So that's going to be an interesting time period, Venus and Leo. It'll come into conjunction with the North Node, of course. So this is going to be a very interesting fated time for new developments in relationships for a lot of people, in communication and interaction, in one-on-one interactions, right? In the way that we show up to show our love and appreciation with other people and the way that we receive it in return. A lot of fated, very karmic, very predestined matches and relationships can come in at this time, and also new powerful insights about how to change and how we need to change in relationship. And this is just in general, right? It's going to affect everybody in a different way. But Mars will go retrograde at 9 degrees Aquarius at the end of June. So that whole pre-shadow period lasts from the 13th of May all the way until June 27th. And then on June 27th, Mars goes retrograde. And so this is, a huge event. It only happens once every couple of years. This is going to be affecting, of course, Aquarius people the most, also Capricorn, especially if you're born at the end degrees of Capricorn. This will affect all of the fixed signs, sun, moon, and rising in Scorpio in particular, because Mars is the ruler of Scorpio. Scorpio rising people and Aries rising people, you're going to be, impacted by the Mars retrograde a little bit more so than other people. If you were born during a Mars retrograde, though, this is actually a nice time. It's a time when you can take a break and move into your natural way of expressing your Mars energy, which is a little bit different than other people, because Mars retrograde people, they tend to internalize things and they tend to have trouble knowing when to act and when not to act. So they'll either jump all in really fast or they'll withhold and not take action. So it can be difficult for them to figure out what action to take and when to take it. It's just a little bit of a different energy. So when you have Mars retrograde natally in your chart, if you know that you have that, then this is a time period when, action can come about in a way that it just makes more sense. It's easier for you, right? It's easier for you to take action, to take the right action at the right times. For everyone else with Mars retrograde, it's about wherever you've gone too far, too hard, too fast, whenever you've imposed your will on others, whenever you've, done things and gone a little over the top, been too aggressive. Mars retrograde forces you to sort of rein that in and go back and fix it, right? To redo it, and to redo it in a gentle way, you have to pull back a little bit when it comes to exercising your willpower out in the world. And if you're someone who's a little bit more timid, who hasn't been acting on their willpower, who hasn't been assertive enough, this is a time when you're going to be asserting yourself way more so. So you're going to become much more assertive and much more able to take the action that you need to take. And so, that's a lot of the energy of the Mars retrograde. This Mars retrograde is very, very long. It actually lasts all the way June through July, and then it ends at the end of August, on August 28th. So this is going to be a huge theme for all of the summer, is going to be this Mars retrograde. Something I forgot to mention that I mentioned at the beginning is that Jupiter and Neptune are actually going to trine in May. So that energy that I talked about, the beautiful energy where it's very, empathic and very compassionate and very psychic and loving and spiritual in those senses, and really good for creativity and deep intimacy and all these different things. That's going to be coming up in May, when we have all this turbulent sort of Uranus energy to sort of soften the blow a little bit. And then, so throughout the summer, we have this Mars retrograde. So that's going to be an interesting time period. Don't initiate new action during a Mars retrograde unless you are a Mars retrograde person. Then that might be something a little bit different. You're going to have to go back and redo everything that you do. Not a good time for electional surgeries or anything like that. But this is, again, general reading. It doesn't apply to everyone. So if you have a question specifically about timing for something during this Mars retrograde, please reach out. You can do a 1-question reading and I will answer it for you specific to your chart and whether or not it's okay for you to do these things, right? Or whether or not it's advisable. It's okay for you to do whatever you want. You have free will, but whether or not it'll work out more easily to your benefit, right? That's what we want to know. And so Mars retrograde is happening. And then, during the Mars retrograde, we have a few different things happening. Mercury will go retrograde in Leo, right? Which is interesting because Mars is retrograding in the sign of Aquarius. So Mars retrograde in Aquarius is in the opposite sign of the Mercury retrograde, which will be happening in Leo. I would definitely say, especially unless you have Mars and Mercury in retrograde in your chart or something crazy going on, that, while Mercury and Mars are both in retrograde at the same time, that's probably not the best time to initiate anything. But this is a time when you're going to have to really go back, review, redo. This is going to be a review period from July 25th onward. So from July 25th to August 18th, that's when Mercury is retrograde. This is going to be a review, and also the Mars retrograde, of all the different changes, transformations, transitions that have happened as a result of the eclipse energy of the past couple of years. So those eclipses that happened in August of 2017, the eclipses that happened in January and February of this year that are coming up right now. And then we're also having more eclipses happening around this time period. So we're going to have the 2 days after Mercury stations to go retrograde at 23 degrees Leo, the moon will come into a total blood moon lunar eclipse again, but this time in Aquarius. So this is going to be an eclipse of letting go, surrender, a culmination point of what was sort of initiated in terms of surrender and letting go of the past, and also bringing in, benefits from past energies, benefits from, things we've already mastered, our skill sets, our talents, our gifts that come in from previous experiences in this lifetime and in previous lifetimes as well. That's a lot of what that energy in February is. And so that's going to be coming up, and the culmination point of that energy that started in February is going to be happening during this lunar eclipse, this total blood moon on July 27th, right after Mercury goes retrograde in Leo and while Mars is retrograding in Aquarius. And Mars is actually going to be in a close conjunction, it looks like, with this blood moon in Aquarius. So it's going to be a very interesting, chaotic, and destabilizing time period, but it's more about reviewing what's already happened than starting something new. It's more about breaking down things that we've created that are not good for us and helping us to realign ourselves with the right path, the right purpose, and to act on our willpower in an appropriate fashion. But a lot is up for review at this time, right? So that's going to be the main theme of this. Okay. So now we're getting into August, right? Now we're getting into August. So in August, and I forgot to mention, in July, there is a partial solar eclipse at 20 degrees in Cancer. This is not a huge eclipse in terms of like the energy, but it's still there. So just changes for Cancer people, right? Changes, transformation. It's a hint at what's coming for the following year and the following year's eclipse cycle in 2019. So this is going to be a little bit of a taste of the energy of 2019 and that eclipse cycle that's starting. So, Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Rising, Capricorn, Sun, Moon, and Rising, also Aries and Libra, right? This is the theme. These cardinal signs and these fixed signs are going to be feeling all of these things more so than the other signs. And everybody has all of these signs in their chart. Different planets are going to be in different houses and different signs. It's, it does happen that people only have like all their planets in one sign or maybe two signs. I mean, my husband has that. So, you won't be affected by some of these transits as much if you have like all mutable planets or mostly mutable planets. So it just depends on what's going on for you. Okay, so in August, we have another solar eclipse. It's going to be a partial solar eclipse at 18 degrees Leo, and that's going to be happening on August 11th. We also have Jupiter trining Neptune, throughout the month of August too. So that's going to be that energy that's going to help soften the blow. So we've had a really chaotic July. And so things start to release and come back into balance and become a little bit easier for us. It's still going to be a little bit of chaos through August, but we have, Jupiter trine Neptune softening the blow, helping us to connect with a deeper purpose, a deeper truth behind what's going on, understanding things from a different level that's not logical, not linear, not analytical, because it's going to be very hard, I think, for us to figure out what's going on if we're only using our analytical minds. Especially this year, because there is going to be a lot of confusion, a lot of chaos, a lot of newness, and a lot of change, right? And it's going to be easier to connect with the change and to understand what's going on and to utilize it if we can tap into that intuition, into that deeper place. And so that's a lot of that Jupiter trine Neptune energy is bringing in for us. So that's going to be very nice. But yeah, so Mercury, so that we have a solar eclipse in Leo again, an energy that's going to finalize all of the eclipse energy in Leo. So if we haven't been pulled into that new path yet in the Leo area of our charts and our lives, that is the time when we're going to be sucked in. And again, it's mimicking the energies of January 31st of 2018, as well as the energies of August 21st, I think it was, of 2017. But this is going to be a much softer energy, and it's going to be more of a finalization of the transformation process that began really last summer. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting time. It's going to be a little bit easier than the July time, but there's still a lot going on there. Yeah. And then as soon as we get out of that, September comes, right? September comes. And so we get into the Venus retrograde pre-shadow because Venus moves into Scorpio. So Mars goes direct at the end of August, and then Venus moves into Scorpio, and then Mars will move into Aquarius and will be squaring Venus on and off through the Venus retrograde, so that's happening as well. But September is sort of the precursor. It's the beginning stages. It's a little bit of a breath of fresh air from, the couple of months before. There's not as much going on, but it's like a preparation phase for this Venus retrograde and this Venus square Mars and all the sort of interesting energy that will come up in relationships when Venus is in retrograde. And so October, we have Venus stationing to go retrograde at 10 degrees Scorpio, and Mercury will enter its retrograde pre-shadow at 27 degrees Scorpio. So in November, we're going to have Mercury and Venus retrograding both in Scorpio. This is a huge month for Scorpios, guys. In November and October, that's actually when the sun moves into Scorpio as well, right? Toward the middle to end of October. I think it's going to be on the 21st or the 22nd this year. I'll have to double check, but this is going to be a major, major time period for Scorpios. With Venus retrograding, this can be a little difficult for Scorpio relationships, also for Taurus relationships. Oh my goodness, especially if you're a Taurus rising, this is a time when a lot's going to be up in the air in relationships. You're going to have to revisit, revise, review things. And don't be too worried because, Venus retrogrades happen I think it's like a year and 8 months or something. I don't know, or a year and 2 months. Yeah, I think that's more correct, a year and 2 months. But so Venus retrogrades happen. They happen very often. They happen pretty frequently. And so this isn't something to be scared of, but it does cause us to have to review. A lot of past relationships can come up and come back into our lives for us to sort of take care of. Maybe they'll come back, but if they do come back, it's usually not lasting, like if a relationship is revived. If you start a relationship during a Venus retrograde, it's usually not going to work out well. It's usually not a good relationship, and it usually takes much, much longer to get rid of that person than you would want it to take. And so just be advised, right? If you meet someone during the Venus retrograde, unless you yourself are a Venus retrograde person, it might not be what you think it is. You might have sort of these you might not be able to be as discerning, right? You might not be able to use that Scorpio discernment where you can see the truth, where you can see through people, when you can figure things out, on that level. And so, just be aware and be wary of all relationships that come in at that time, not just romantic partnerships or close personal relationships like that. I mean, friendships, new acquaintances, all of it, new clients, right? You might think that you have a really great new client and they could end up being very, very difficult, right? Later on. So, this is something to be aware of. Relationships are not going to be what they seem to be when you have Venus going into retrograde. Venus is much stronger during retrograde, so there's usually a bigger pull to get into relationship because Venus is so much closer to the Earth during that time. That doesn't mean that you should necessarily act on that impulse, but we will be pulled into wanting to engage in relationships more. If you're in a good, healthy relationship, this can be good for you. A lot can be pulled out into the open. This is about deepening intimacy in your current relationships, redoing, revising, going back and sort of looking at that. But it's about deepening intimacy in relationships and deepening trust in relationships and finding relationships with people that you can trust and, connect with on that level. That's a lot of what the energy is going to be about. But I would be just clear in the fact that if you do start a relationship, because you might be pulled to do so, right? If you're single, you're going to be more wanting to, more craving relationship at that time a lot of the times. And you might jump into something that might not be the best situation, right? So that's just something to be aware of. And that doesn't mean that every relationship that happens during a Venus retrograde won't work out. That is absolutely not the case. But you need to know what's going on in your chart to be, sure about that. So yeah, Mercury retrograde pre-shadow happens at 27 degrees in Scorpio. And so they won't be in the same degrees, Mercury and Venus, as they're in retrograde. But they're both going to be in retrograde. So Scorpios are going to have an interesting time. The fixed signs, again, are going to be having an interesting time. A lot of redoing, revisiting. I can really see with, in Scorpio in particular, a lot of past relationships where we're really holding on to emotional connections to people and these emotional cords that need to be cut. Those are going to come up for review, right? With Mercury in retrograde, also a lot of communications from old partners. And it, again, not always romantic partnerships, right? Not always romantic partnerships, but a lot of old relationships can come into your life and come back into your life for review and to revisit. So that way you can work through those energies, you can release it. Because when we're talking about Scorpio, we're talking about deep emotional and psychological attachments to people and to things. And this is going to show us where we haven't let go yet, and maybe we thought we did, and so we need to really work through that, and we need to cut those cords. We need to maybe do a cord cutting ceremony of some kind, or some sort of energetic thing, or some sort of physical thing, even, where we're putting up boundaries and telling them, no, enough is enough. That's something that could very much come up for a lot of people at that time period. And so Uranus will be moving back into Aries in November as well, because Uranus is in retrograde by that point. And so that Uranus and Taurus energy that we started to feel, those changes, those transitions, those frustrations, will start to back off, and we'll have to revisit the changes that we haven't made yet that we still need to make with Uranus in Aries. So, especially if you have, again, 10 degrees of the cardinal signs, planets like Sun, Moon, or Rising, or personal planets, that's going to affect you more. And so Mercury stations to go retrograde actually in Sagittarius in November. So it'll be stationing to go retrograde at 13 degrees, 29 minutes in Sagittarius. And so that'll happen on the 17th. And then so Venus stations to go direct the day before, Mercury stations to go retrograde. So that's kind of interesting. So if stuff came up for you during the Venus retrograde, and Venus and Mercury will actually conjunct. I made a mistake about that. So they will come into conjunction during this time period of Mercury being in retrograde. So that's going to be revisiting some stuff that came up for you, relationship stuff, intimacy stuff, deep-seated connections to relationships that need to be let go of. You're going to be able to work through it a little bit more easily. You may have to revisit some things, tie up some more loose ends, that type of thing. And then also in November, Jupiter moves into Sagittarius. So Sagittarius is getting a lot of action beginning in November, but most of it's positive, right? Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius can be a little bit harder for Sagittarius people. We just had that in December, and just a lot of difficulty in communicating in general with Mercury in Sagittarius, because it's not as analytical, logical, and linear. It's in detriment in Sagittarius. And so speaking more broadly, we're thinking more philosophically, we're not thinking as in terms of details. We can skate over the details a lot more easily. And so that's a lot of what can be coming up for that Mercury retrograde during Sagittarius. But Jupiter is in Sagittarius. So this is actually really happy for Sagittarius, Sun, Moon, and Rising. And all of the fire signs will be feeling this effect in a positive way. So Jupiter in Sagittarius starts to benefit the fire signs beginning in November, and that'll be a year-long transit that'll last all the way until the fall of 2019. So, yeah, good news for Sagittarius, and happy birthday, Sagittarius, in November. So that'll be some nice energy because the sun will be conjunct Jupiter for a lot of you who have early Sagittarius birthdays, and so that'll be a really great solar return. That's really good fortune, optimism, new success that comes into your life. That's a really good solar return to have. So, if you are an early Sagittarius and you're having your solar return, you're going to have that Jupiter conjunction there. So that's going to be very, very nice for you. A very good year in general, especially throughout 2019. And then the North Node moves into Cancer, the South Node moves into Capricorn in November as well. And so we're coming out of all this fixed and, cardinal energy, although this is still more cardinal energy, but we're changing it up a little bit, right? The cardinal energy prior to this point was more about stabilizing and creating and building and hard work and determination and all that sort of authoritarian self-discipline energy, right? Where we're talking about Saturn being in the sign of Capricorn. Now the South Node's going to come into Capricorn and the North Node's going to come into Cancer. And next year in 2019, the South Node will actually hit Saturn, and that's going to be interesting. I'm definitely going to end up doing a video about that. I'll probably do like a whole Saturn and Capricorn video soon, and we'll get into that because that's going to be an interesting time globally and also individually, of course, for a lot of people. And then the North Node moves into Cancer. So instead of focusing on a new path that's like more authentic and more connected with our hearts and tradition and, connecting with people and communicating with people in more traditional heartfelt ways, like one-on-one in a personal way, and also merging those two energies, right? A lot of more heartfelt, more connected communication via the internet, those types of things where we're connecting with people more live, right? And we're having like live chats and live connections with people as we're doing these types of videos and things like that. That's come up a lot more with the North Node in Leo. The North Node is moving in Cancer though, so we're going to be focusing more on the home, on family, on our own safety, security, and inner sense of emotional stability and comfort. And so that's going to be sort of what we're moving into as we come into 2019 in particular, but starting in November of 2018. And what we're going to be moving away from is these old, cold, rigid structures, focusing more on our career, our public, what we're doing out in the world, focusing more on the rules in terms of like these rules and hierarchies that are imposed on us from the outside, right? That's going to be something we're going to start to let go of, especially as we come into 2019. So in 2018, there's going to be a pull and a gravitation toward with the government structures, a gravitation toward vying for more power. And in 2019, that might backfire on them in a lot of different ways. So I'm interested to see what happens. The next couple of years are going to be very, very interesting on a global scale. And so I'll probably do a video just on that too, because that's interesting to talk about in and of itself. Okay, and then in December, Mercury stations direct, and that's pretty much all that's happening. December, actually, this year. So last Christmas that just happened, that was a lot of chaotic energy, and it was difficult, right? For a lot of people, and not for everyone, but for a lot of people, it was a lot of, very chaotic, very turbulent, very difficult energy. We had to revisit all that Saturn and Sagittarius energy, finish it out, finalize it. Mercury being in retrograde and all of that. It was a little difficult for some people. This is actually going to be a much more calm December. So, the holidays in 2018, I would say, are going to be less chaotic, less turbulent, easier for travel and for connecting and, all those types of things. So it's a good end to the year after having so much, there's a lot going on this year, guys. Okay, so I feel like that was a lot of information, and hopefully you found that helpful. I'm not going to go through all the signs specifically just because for, the sake of time and preserving some of my energy, because I've been talking for a while, but I hope you found this helpful. If you do want to know what's going to be happening for you specifically, I can, of course, do a 2018 transit reading for you. Again, it's $20 off. You can find the link in the description of the video below. I love connecting with all of you. Or if you just have one specific thing that you're interested in, like knowing what's going to happen this year, you can book a 30-minute reading or even a single question reading and ask me that question, and I will answer it to you, very concisely, very thoroughly also. And you can get a little insight into what's going on in your life. I like doing those single question readings, like I'm a detective trying to figure out what's going on. So feel free to reach out to me. Thank you guys so much for supporting me, for watching my channel, for liking my Facebook page, like subscribing if you want to subscribe to this channel so you can find more updates, because I will be posting much more in terms of content, in terms of different content. I'm going to be doing more videos about the global astrology and the changes that are coming up. And I really want to help you guys to navigate and utilize the energy in the best way possible, so that way you can be supported through this change, and so you can help create the change instead of having the change create you. And so that's going to be coming up. I'm also going to be doing interviews with a lot of different interesting people, a lot of my friends, my colleagues, a lot of people that talk about different things besides astrology, but we'll always tie it back into astrology. And so, we'll have episodes of a series that I'm going to be starting with my friend Griselda Pacheco called Persephone's Underworld, where we're going to be going into the deeper topics, the things that are a little bit taboo, right? So there'll be a lot of stuff coming up. So, keep subscribing, pay attention to what's happening, like my Facebook page, all of that, and you'll keep up to date with it. So anyway, I hope you all have a really wonderful, beautiful, powerful 2018. There's a lot of potential here for really great change. If you want to, create some change in your life, if you want to create better structure in your life, if you want to take back your own power, your own responsibility for what's going on in your life, because that's really a big theme this year, taking responsibility and reassuming responsibility for our role in creating our own lives, as well as the collective, experience of what's going on right now. So the things that we don't like in terms of, what's going on globally, because there's a lot not to like, right? Taking responsibility for our role in creating that, and not just placing blame on other people, so that way we can show up to be responsible for changing it ourselves. That's really what the theme is. That's really what the energy is. So I hope that, this helped you to feel a little bit more empowered to do that, and to create that in your lives, and to deal with what's going on, right? So you have a little bit of an idea of what's coming up ahead, so you can navigate. So anyway, I hope you all have a beautiful, wonderful year, and I will see you again really soon.